Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the PlotCast. I'm your host, Nate Slater.
And I'm Chris Sandberg, and today we're going to be discussing the death of traditional anime.
That's right, folks. We are talking about the death of traditional anime. Now, what does that mean? And as far as we're talking about, like anime we grew up with, as far as meaning like hand drawn on cells. So it's like shot by shot, painstakingly hand drawn by making it look as real as possible while still giving that anime feel and being highly detailed. That's one thing that comes to mind
Taken
when
away side. Yeah.
yeah, it comes to mind when I think about that, like, traditional anime. Like, a lot of the late '70s, early '80s, and all the way through the '90s, we had a lot of beautiful art. As far as the late '70s go, it was still kind of very early stages. I felt like a lot of the characters were drawn, like, very thin and stuff like that, as to where when you get into the '80s and '90s, things are more proportionate.
Or unproportionate, depending on the type of anime.
Yeah,
Obviously, style had a big thing to do with it.
yeah.
Certain studios having a certain style for anime. It's exactly as you say. They were hand drawn, they were specifically on cells, the traditional cartoon style of animating. Um, but now we are seeing more CGI, if not almost entirely.
Now, when you say CGI, it's not necessarily like the Matrix kind of CGI or stuff like that. It's also being drawn on the computer. Really,
Usually, what they do is they take a model, specifically a person, which would be the easiest way to do it, and you have the image wrapped around a skin, if you will. And then while it's still animated over the course of like someone talking or blinking or whatever, the movements in CGI help the the artist get the right position and the right frame set. They also do it with backgrounds. Backgrounds are probably most commonly used because that was the first introduction of CGI into anime, is setting up frames so they didn't have to keep hand drawing the same thing or having the exact same frame. They could move it slightly because everything is just pasted onto this 3D model that they have in the background.
yeah, and we're not, you know, talking really crap about the people who do this. I respect it, but
Oh,
it
absolutely. It's a time saver, and it's just the progression of art. There's always going to be a progression in any type of field that anyone works in. That's just how time works. But when it comes to the media that we have now and how fast people are pumping things out, there's also a level of laziness where people don't want to
yeah,
put forth the effort or put into the time. They don't want to show off the mastery that they have for the type of animation that they're doing, and that's what feels like has been lost in time.
yeah. I mean, if you look back to, really, you could say the '80s is what really kicked it off. You have highly skilled artists going into super detailed drawing these awesome paintings. Put each painting down one by one, take a picture, go, take a picture, go. You got a movie. I'm talking about like movies like, let's say, MD Geist, you got Akira, that's a big one. Ghost in the Shell, which I think maybe the original Ghost in the Shell did maybe use some early CGI work in it. I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure
think
it did.
so. From what I read, everything was hand drawn. But again, actually, no, yeah, everything is hand drawn. That was the thing. People thought it was CGI because of how good it looked and how well they handled 3D modeling because it's actually in the movie. Um, but it is hand drawn, and that's kind of one of those things that you look at and go, wow, they did it so well. And now, when everyone has the technology, they still skimp on other things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where, and I think a lot of it has to do with how saturated the market is with
Yep.
anime. Compared to back in the day, I mean, they could spend 7 years making an incredible anime because they knew that people would sit down, enjoy it, talk about it for years because they're so few and far between. Now they're just being pumped out every month. Like there's always like a new trend, a new big thing when it comes to anime, and it goes so fast. Um,
It almost feels like we're
Animation,
getting a new Pokemon character a week kinda
yeah,
thing. Not
exactly.
necessarily saying Pokemon itself, but Pokemon is an anime, and Pokemon there's always started with 151, and now look at it, it's like, I don't know, over 1,000, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! That's still
Yep.
going. But yeah, kids anime aside, when it comes to adult anime, that was the big draw, right? That's what brought anime to America. Akira is largely responsible for that, and Dragon Ball Z is also largely
Yep.
responsible for that. In fact, I think Pokemon should probably thank both of those because they opened the door for Pokemon to be the behemoth that it is
Yeah.
now.
And the funny thing is Pokemon, in my opinion, wasn't really drawn that well,
Right.
but when you're going to the big draws, and when I say the big draws is like what got anime big in the States, were the movies. Not necessarily
Yeah.
Dragon Ball, but I'm talking about
Perfect
Akira,
Blue,
Ghost in the
uh,
Shell. Freaking we also had Armitage the Third, that was great. Ninja Scroll. That
Ninja
that
Scrolls demonstrated that you could have a dark, edgy fantasy movie in anime form, for adults,
yeah,
and it would still be successful. It didn't just show society that there's an interest in cartoons for adults, which is what they thought of it as back then. It also showed that there's a level of artistry that can be done with these anime, that there's, techniques that can be used by other studios and stuff like that. And it's not just the art techniques, it's the storytelling techniques. There's also the voice acting, giving us new depth and a new type of acting that people didn't think that they could take seriously. Voice acting obviously has gone crazy now in
yeah,
comparison to back then. Nobody really saw voice actors as Hollywood stars,
yeah.
and now it's a whole different ballgame. In fact, they only really hire Hollywood stars to do voice acting these days.
Speaking of Hollywood, Armitage the Third actually had Kiefer Sutherland as one of the main characters' voice actors, which is crazy because I remember watching the trailer for that. I'm like, wait, Kiefer Sutherland is doing an anime going
Yeah,
in.
well, we also had Mark Hamill.
Well, yeah, he did Robotech, one of those, and he's done other animes as well. I mean, he even did the first live action Guyver
Yeah,
movie, which was an anime. Well, now, as far as voice acting goes, today we have it to where back in the day, we didn't really follow exactly what the script was in the original languages. Now we're actually more close to the original scripts to keep it more coherent to the original story other than trying to guess, well, maybe he meant this or meant that. We're more closely tied to the creators than we ever were before, and that's mainly because of the fandom and internet. Let's be honest.
right. Yeah, there's a sense of keeping the integrity of the story alive.
Yeah.
That's really pushed these days, and it's pushed by fans. I mean, really, when they used to change a lot, and they still change a lot depending
Yeah.
on the studio. Um, but when they used to change a lot, there was a lot of pushback from fans when they found out it was different, or if they had the subtitles and watched the
Yeah.
Japanese version. Um, and people started to just get the Japanese version with subtitles and just not even bother with subs because things would just or dubs because things were just getting out of control. So in order to keep the American audience interested in the English versions, they started to adapt. I mean, they had to.
Yeah.
It was that or it was a sinking ship. So now with studios trying to be more accurate as possible, there's definitely a whole lot more coming out than it ever used. I mean, it's been streamlined now.
Yeah.
We have CGI to really thank for that. CGI is kind of like the AI of its
Yeah.
time. It made things so much easier and helped people just progress a lot faster
Well, the
than
thing
they
is
normally
too,
would have.
When you say CGI, I don't just mean computer generated images. I'm also referring to the artwork being done on computers. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people will hand draw it on the computer, but it just doesn't have, I feel like the gritty feel is not there anymore. I feel with the computer, at least from most of what I've seen over the past 10, 15 years, a lot of things are a lot more brighter, less
Yeah,
gloomy
well, that
too.
has a lot to do with the way the art is applied. It's a lot harder now with it being digital because digital, the idea was to make things clean. And
Yeah.
it worked for that. But when you talk gritty, a lot of that was, hey, I want this to be shaded. I want this. Like it was as simple as wiping your finger on the graphite pencil
Yeah.
and, giving it that dark smudge. Now that's a process that's clicking through different categories, trying to isolate a certain area given an effect. It's harder now to do things that were very simple.
And a perfect
And
example is comparing Dragon Ball Z to Dragon Ball Super.
yeah,
And Dragon Ball Z was all done on cells and stuff like that. Dragon Ball Super is all done on the PC or Apple, whatever computer they're using to draw it. And you can see the difference.
it doesn't have the weight, but there is a level to reliability
Yeah.
for the newer stuff. And a lot of it comes down to the resolution. Now, when everything's digital, it's so clean and so precise that you can completely inflate the resolution as TVs do
Yeah.
constantly. As time goes by, it gets inflated. You can still watch the stuff that has been made with a lower resolution because it's so refined. Whereas, yes, the gritty pencil smudge looked great on a tube TV that was tiny, but when you blow it up onto a giant screen, you start to realize that, it's either blurred or pixelated. It's harder to watch, which is why they remaster them, which is great that they do that. But if they don't, if it's a studio that doesn't exist anymore or rights are being, thrown around, then you have to put up with the original, and that
Yeah.
that that can be hard to digest. Like I understand that there's a need for it to a certain extent. There's just a laziness when it comes to newer technology because it is harder to do certain effects, and everything being so time constrained to get things out now. It's less about the art and more about get it to sales.
Yeah. And a perfect example of that also is be going back and watch the 90s Berserk and compare it to the latest Berserk show that came out with the Berserk movies. The one that came out in, I think, 96, 97. It had its moments to where it was beautiful and dark, gritty, but then it also had its moments where the action was just of looking at a panel of a manga. And then when you go into the newer version, it's fluid. The only issue is that it's crappy CGI and it takes you out of it and it's not doesn't look as good. The characters look a little thinner, not as.
That was realistic even.
Yeah,
But yeah, so Akira is a perfect example of it being hand drawn but still fluid.
yeah,
Um, the action in it was very realistic. There was a gravity to everything. You didn't feel like, even though it's a sci-fi movie, it
yeah,
didn't feel super unrealistic. It felt very grounded. The world felt lived in, which is another great thing that they were able to do back in the day. There was a lot of time that they had to work on these things. They could make them feel like they were lived in. The same thing goes for Ghost in the Shell. Again, sci-fi. There's a lot of lore behind it, and the world, while it's the first time a lot of people are seeing the technologies that we kind of take for granted because they're in a lot of things, even though they're not real. People seeing it the first time, everything had a purpose.
yeah,
It wasn't just there to look cool. Some things did look cool, but it felt functional, even though none of it was real.
yeah.
Um, and, and I feel like that is something that's lost. Now, yes, there are still some major productions that will still give you that feel,
Mhm.
But I feel like most of it is lost. I mean, even in TV shows, we had another great sci-fi epic was Neon Genesis Evangelion. Again, lived in world. Like it wasn't just the anime, the sound design
Yep.
had you grounded. It made the bass, like whenever the angels came down, there was the scare before the fight.
Yeah.
You felt every moment of anxiety that the main character had. You went through the journey with him with that sound design
A
because of how daunting every sound was.
and when you see them take a punch or a hit, like, you can feel it in the bass when they're
Yeah.
doing it.
And the animation is weighted. You see the gravity, you see the destruction, like everything that happens with purpose and affects the story. It's just one of those things that, you know, you watch and you feel. Whereas now, a lot of the action that you see is it feels like everything else you've watched.
Yeah.
It doesn't have impact anymore.
Yeah, even,
Um,
like, Dragon Ball Super compared to Z. I love Dragon Ball Z, that's why I keep bringing it up. In Z, you felt the weight of their punches, you felt the power of them powering up. In Super, it just feels a little bit cheapened, and I think it's a part of the artwork. That's just my opinion, but I I I just don't feel that connection like I did back then. Now, when the Brawly movie came out, the artwork was on point, and the sound design in that movie was incredible. So, I
yeah,
feel that if they were to do the whole thing, which is why I'm glad that they are doing the little kind of reboot, remake of, the Beerus, and maybe they're doing more, who knows? It's still speculatory at this moment. But I feel like this is their chance to do right by fans and by themselves.
they have been going for so long that they have been influenced by these types of movies and anime that we've talked about, but they've also lended a hand in influencing
Of
other
course.
things.
Yep.
Um, and I feel like they've been able to set standards, and some of the standards have been hilarious. We all joke about how it takes 8, 9 episodes to go Super Saiyan. We were just sitting there looking constipated and talking about what you're doing. It, that those are tactics that unfortunately were used by other animes too. Um, but I feel like with the introduction of CGI, that has changed a lot too.
Yeah.
Things are a lot more fast paced. We don't get nearly as long of series anymore. Yu Yu Hakusho, I felt like as short as it seemed at the time, it's still 150-ish
Yeah. I
episodes.
think it was like 160 something,
Yeah.
I think.
Uh, and that's pretty crazy when you consider now they're like, 24 episodes is a lot. Maybe
Yeah.
we won't even do that. Um,
Well, to be
you
fair,
know,
back in the day too, a lot of animes didn't even get that far. Some only got 4 episodes, some 2, some
yeah,
1.
Neon Genesis. I mean, how many episodes did
I
that
think
have?
they were 25 or 26 episodes.
25, and then they led into the movies, which kind of just rewrote everything anyway.
Yeah.
But they had a lot to say. And there's nothing wrong with having your silly comedies or your just we're here for the action types of shows. But there's very few that really go super in depth, in the human condition
Yeah.
or, this, that, and the other. Um, even when they back then when they were going for colorful and stylish, you had things like Cowboy Bebop. It
Yep.
still felt weighted. Everything was intentional. And even though there were some long major pauses throughout that entire show, and there really were a lot of them, they felt intentional. And yes, they were intentional to save money in that sense, but they were also intentional to show kind of like the nonchalant attitude that Spike had, or, you know, uh, to feel the weight of something that just happened, something major.
I feel like part of this also comes down to with, I guess you could say, worldwide involvement in anime now is that a lot of the anime we grew up with has now dulled down to younger audiences, and maybe that's part of the problem too, is that now they're trying to cater to a general audience rather than an adult audience.
Yeah. And I understand that's kind of like an epidemic in the in media in general, in Hollywood, and anyone who makes movies or TV shows. A lot of people are just aiming for wide audience and don't really give a crap about telling a great story, which is a shame. One person that you can always rely on to give you a good story in Hollywood is Christopher Nolan.
Of
And the
course.
reason I bring him up is Inception. He has gone on to say that he was heavily inspired by an anime to make Inception. And when you do compare them, they they are very comparable. And that is Paprika, another big heavy hitter. It's almost exactly alike, that, and there are scenes that you can compare side by side, and it's great that Christopher Nolan was able to recreate them because of how visually stunning they were for its time as an anime. And he liked to recreate things with as minimal obviously there's tons of CGI in that movie, but he would reduce the amount of CGI if he could do it
Yeah.
practically, like with the spinning hallway and
Yeah.
stuff like that. That those fights, it's like they happened in Paprika, and so he was able to do it practically. And there's plenty of tricks to the trade and mirror effects and stuff like that, but um, it goes to show that that anime back then inspired tons of people, even the people that are re-inspiring the younger audience
Yeah.
in a different form, in a different medium. Christopher Nolan isn't the only one that was inspired. We had Darren Aronofsky, who was inspired by Perfect Blue, which is an insane anime. It's beautifully done, not just the art but the storytelling. He's used pieces of it for other movies that he's done. In Requiem for a Dream, he's taken the concept of slowly going insane, and he's taken certain scenes that he was able to reuse. And then he also made Black Swan, which is almost a retelling of the same tale.
Except a different situation.
Yeah, different
Yeah.
situation, but it's still kind of, a female idol,
Yeah.
a performer, going insane, and going through this kind of the same steps as she does so. And it won awards, as did the original movie. So it just goes to show that it can inspire beyond generations.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you there. A lot of anime that I grew up with inspired me. Like, of course, you already said Neon Genesis Evangelion. That was a big one. I mean, watching that, that was really the second big robot anime I saw growing up. Number one for me, and probably always will be. It's dated now, but it's Robotech. It was kind of like Star Wars meets Gundam, basically. It was
Yeah, Gundam
really
Wing,
cool
that was an anime for the ages. Obviously, Gundam has been huge for a long time and
since the
still is.
70s. Yep.
Yeah, but Wing itself, there was just attention to detail in the
Yep.
art. There was mastery in the storytelling. Each character felt like they belonged, and there wasn't really much to it to really hate or knock on.
The story was
It
great.
Yeah, a lot of it was great. Um, and that obviously for me was my introduction to Gundam, and it probably was for a lot of people.
Me too.
Honestly, I don't feel like the shows got better after that.
Yeah.
I mean, some are still very good in a lot of senses, but they changed style, and the storytelling would get a lot slower. And Wing, though, was the perfect show.
Yeah.
Um,
Peak Gundam.
Peak Gundam for sure. It definitely got me into building those models. I'm not sure if you ever did those.
Nope. I tried to because I had one. And I was just like, this is too much. I'd rather just have the toy. I was a kid. I didn't care.
Yep, yep.
But and the thing that was cool about it too is they had laser swords, lightsabers essentially. So it's
Beam sabers.
beam
That's
sabers.
what
So
they call
Star
them. Yeah.
another Star Wars influence type anime that I liked growing up was the Tenchi series, which was
Oh
essentially
yeah.
just like Star Wars, but it was more a harem kind of thing. One guy, a whole bunch of girls after him, and it was crazy. But when it got to the serious action, especially with the OVAs, which are way better than the actual normal shows, We need more of those because they were more gritty, more attention to detail. The actual TV series were a lot more lighthearted and not really detailed in the artwork there. So that was another big influence because it hit all the boxes. It was like Star Wars, it was like It was like a mixture between Dragon Ball and Star Wars. They had lightsabers, they had laser blasts, starships. It was fun. It was the whole 9. And then another couple that I grew up on was Voltron, Gotcha Man, which in America was called G-Force. Why they changed it, I don't know. They had Ronin Warriors, which was awesome, which was very short. I didn't realize that, but now they're doing a sequel series, which the artwork doesn't look too bad. So I'm hoping that it tickles my fancy a little bit, but
Right.
obviously Dragon Ball is the best. And another one that I saw in high school, which was amazing, was Street Fighter 2, the movie, the animated movie. That felt a lot like the game, plus felt more Dragon Ball Z-ish too. The action was really good, and it wasn't afraid to pull punches, or well, it didn't pull any punches to be honest. It was really adult, which was cool.
Yes. Yeah. One thing that I do want to mention before we finish up is when we're talking about traditional anime, a lot of people will say, well, we still have certain studios that are set in their ways. We have Studio Ghibli,
Mhm.
which that's great that they still do it the old fashioned way, the hand drawn, but they are set up in a way that they can. They have, the history, they have the artists that are renowned. But I feel like when Studio Ghibli, once the creators are either retired or passed, that the lost art truly will be lost after
Yeah,
that.
I agree, and that's gonna be sad because a lot of the anime we grew up on inspire us even today. And another thing too we didn't really talk about before we go, as far as the movies go, they had like some baller soundtracks. They really
Oh
did.
yeah.
Like I remember Tank Police, the opening theme for that was very 80s. I would listen to it now, I'm like, oh, why did I even like that? But still at the time I thought it was cool. And I hope that a lot of the animation studios now look back on the older animation studios and the old animes that they did and try and incorporate some of that old gritty artwork, hand drawn stuff maybe into the future or try and mimic it a bit. Uh,
I feel like there will be because there's definitely a market for nostalgia.
yes.
And when someone comes out and goes, there's always going to be one that goes, I'm going to be the thinking man or the artistic man's movie maker, and our studio is only going to do this the right way. And they will make tons of money because they are the only
Yeah.
ones that do it.
It might take
Uh,
them a lot of years to do it, but they'll do it.
yeah, exactly. There will be another Studio Ghibli out there, but I think a lot of it will still use CGI regardless. They'll just
Yes.
do it right though.
Yeah. And I've always been one of those people that feels like CGI should be used to improve the existing art that you made, not be the art.
Right,
That's just my
exactly.
opinion.
I mean, when CGI started to show up in anime, you had things like the Appleseed movie that to today's standard looks absolutely horrible. It was revolutionary at the time, but I don't want to say it was revolutionary because we also had Final Fantasy Spirits Within.
Yeah.
Like that was revolutionary.
Yes.
That had a big name cast, While yes, looking back it's still kind of clunky.
And it was a
At the
bad movie.
time, yeah, it was a bad movie, but at the time, it looked amazing. It was
Yes.
groundbreaking at the time, and then we had Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Still to this day, there are scenes
Yep.
that you could argue whether it's CG or not. But again, they're not anime.
Yeah.
Uh, but CG in itself, like that's proof that it can look good.
Yes.
So there is an anime that is actually kind of older. It's in the early stages of CG, and it used CGI very well, and that was Tekken Kinkri. For those that haven't seen it, it is based on a manga that came out in the 80s. So they chose to keep the original style of the characters, the design, but the CG was more so in how it was done and more so with the backgrounds.
Yeah.
It was created by the team that did the Animatrix, so of course it's gonna be done really well, but at the time, it was still early, and even now to today's standards, I feel like it stands up very, very well.
And another fun fact, speaking of Animatrix, the same people who worked on the one part of the Animatrix worked on Final Fantasy Spirits Within.
Yep. I mean, it was revolutionary, but it was still very experimental,
Yeah.
so there were very few people that really were taking advantage of it.
Yeah. So that's pretty much our feelings on today's anime. The 80s and 90s were where it was at. I'm not hating on today's anime that much, although I would love to see some studios take a chance and try and go old school. Let us know what you think. Are we crazy? Are we fossils? Leave a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. That's it for the podcast. If you don't know who we are Plot Hole Productions. We're on Spotify, Instagram, YouTube, of course. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Plot Hole Productions. Once again, I'm your host, Nate Slater,
And I'm Chris Sambrick, and we'll catch you in the
in the
void.
void.